Good evening. This is such a wonderful crowd to see. It is incredibly diverse across age and demographics. So thank you everyone for braving Friday evening traffic in Indranagar and Domblur and being here with us. So thank you so much for joining us. We've got three phenomenal people to speak to. The two of them and this simply incredible book. How many of you have already read the book? Has anyone? Yes. Oh, wow. Faster than me. Damn. which is where we'd love to start. I mean, Romulus Whitaker needs absolutely no introduction. Hero, pioneer, wise old man of Indian snakes. Yeah, with 5 decades, at least 5 decades worth of adult contribution to conservation in India, but no book so far. So what was the purpose of writing this book? Where did the idea come from?
Good question. I've been talking about all my adventures to all my friends over a beer or just sitting around the campfire or whatever. And people, they love to hear adventures, but they always keep saying, write it down, we want to see a book. And I'm saying, yeah. I mean, going back and messing around with a computer or a typewriter or something, forget it. No, can't do that. But it had to be done.
I think he just ran out of an audience. So all of us who've heard his stories 20 million times saying, no, we don't want to hear this anymore. So he just had to talk to somebody else.
Yeah, Janaki, of course, is a legend in her own right. I mean, even before I met you for the book and at the farm, everyone had heard of Janaki for all the work she's done in ad films and documentary films, your own production house, Draco Films, that you all founded together and worked together. You all have made so many, including an Emmy Award-winning documentary. Yeah, but I mean, it's always a team effort. But what was the most difficult part for you when it came to writing a book with Rom?
I think dealing with his notes and files. And so, before we started writing the book, I read about how other people wrote books, like how a couple of writers co-authored a book. So one guy said they worked independently in the morning in their respective studies. And in the afternoon, they exchanged the chapters they had written in the morning and they edited the other person's writings in the afternoon. I mean, our writing schedule was nowhere that organized. So I would work on one chapter, give it to him, and he would send it back to me, but keep the file, and then send it back to me some 2 months later. So I don't know whether I've seen these corrections and edits, so I'll have to go over everything again. So it was a nightmare. It could have been done in a year, but it took us some 5 years to do it.
But it was worth it. I mean, everyone who put their hands up, who've read the book, I'm sure you'll agree with me, it's an incredibly captivating book. I mean, every story. And Rom, your life is crazier than a Quentin Tarantino movie, right? Every single character that wanders through this book is as crazy and wild as the next. But before we get into the book itself, I thought it would be interesting to talk about your life that influenced the way this book was written. And from hero to pioneer, from hunter to hero to pioneer, right? The Snakeman of India has had a massive transition. And you've received so many awards, international awards, Whitley Award, Rolex Award, Padma Shri as well in India in 2018. But your influences in your childhood were as illustrious as well, right? Your stepdad, his father was the brother of Sarojini Naidu?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Right.
Yeah, and so your step-grandfather and your step-grandmother are incredibly illustrious freedom fighters, part of the movement. Kamala Devi is known for everyone who supports the arts. I mean, like, she really brought Indian art, liberal art form into the front and center in the early 50s, just as India was coming into its own. Did they impact you? Did you have enough interactions with them?
Yeah, to be very, very honest with you, I wish I had had much more interaction with them. I mean, Kamala Devi lived in our house when she was in Bombay at that time, and of course going off to Delhi for her various official duties and so on. And I mean, she was a wonderful lady in so many ways, and she doted on my younger brother and sister, who were just little rugrats at that time. And you know, you could just see her grinning, and when she worked with them. Otherwise, she was had a fairly stern demeanor, and but yeah, it was just wonderful to interact with him at that time. Harindranath, of course, man, what a crazy man he was. I mean, he was just totally wild, and I mean, anyone who's heard about him or read about him probably knows a few of the stories, and. Yeah.
Did he tell you some of those stories? Do you want to share one of them with us?
No, they're not for sharing.
What about your childhood? What was your childhood like?
Why are we talking about me?
Because you're part of the book.
It was very sheltered, very urban, no wildlife. Well, there were about 4 or 5 birds in our urban backyard that I learned the names of. And house cats. And
So how did that transition happen from this urban child to saying that I'm only going to work in wildlife? Because now you only work. Save the applause for the
urban
end.
wildlife.
How was that transition? Because, you know, when you read the book, there are some themes that come through, and transitioning from one to another is something that's throughout the book. So now you've done King Cobra Summer, you've done My Husband and Other Animals. Great and small, Rom, great and small animals. So how did that transition happen for you?
Well, like you said earlier, I was working on soaps and commercials and, well, urban livelihood. So it wasn't very interesting. And also I was a woman in a man's industry, and I just felt I wasn't getting the respect I thought I deserved. And so I was trying to transition from being a film editor to a director, because I thought then I would have much more respect. And that was the time when a common friend introduced Rom and me. And Rom was trying to promote his film he wanted to make on King Cobra. So I think Rom was my entry into wildlife. I didn't have any other opportunity to work with wildlife or even view wildlife.
Well, a massive transition. I've seen the amazing place you all stay in on the outskirts of Mysore. I mean, well outside Mysore. And I mean, that's far away from urban life. And these transitions fill the book, right? I remember reading one of the first few chapters, Rom, where you've landed in India. How old were you at that time?
I was
9?
8 years old.
8 years old.
1951, by the way. Is anyone here?
Well, it's not 1851.
Well done, ma'am. Well done. Yeah, and you talk of getting off the boat into the madness that is Mumbai traffic. So you're saying that way back in 1951, the traffic was already crazy? What was that culture shock for a American boy to step into the wild world of Bombay, like in the 1950s?
Yeah, how exciting. It was just totally exciting. I mean, I was lambasted by everything, the sights, the smells. Well, I think I was really impressed with the fact that kids were running back and forth across the street. In America, they don't allow that. You got to hold an adult's hand if you want to cross the street. And so everything that I saw was just total amazing. Absolutely.
All right, so let's jump into the book with this, yeah, because we're talking about transitions, and I've read the book a couple of times already. I cannot recommend it more. It's beautiful. Whether you like wildlife or you just like the human journey, it's a beautiful, captivating book to read. And one of the themes that hold through is this nostalgia that you bring to it, right? I mean, you talk about your childhood in Bombay. your journey into boarding school for a short stint in the Nilgiris. I'm assuming that was the Lawrence School, Lovedale, at the time?
It was, yes, Lawrence School.
Which you didn't like?
I didn't like it, no. It was said to be originally a military school, and then it transitioned into a regular kind of school. But it didn't transition while I was there. It was still a military school. And I got this real bad feeling about the military and about organized violence and organized anything, actually. So, yeah.
Well, organized violence, I understand. But this is coming from the same boy who, same man, back as a boy, made Molotov cocktails and threw them on the school wall. If you open this book, you'll see a photograph of you with your pet python in school against a wall of the school, and I swear, if you look carefully, you can see the burn marks of the Molotov cocktails that you threw against them.
Hey, that was fun. We were just having fun.
It's just violence against a wall,
Yeah.
not against little kids.
Well, not against little kids. But you talk about all these things, right? You talk about your journey with bullying. You talk about your journey. You talk about the cartoons and the ads that you should remember as well, the little jingles that were played on TV. You remember all your nursery rhymes. You remember all your teachers' names. How do you remember this?
I've got a strange brain. It's really weird because I've got a song-oriented brain. Sorry. And I can remember the jingles, Pepsi-Cola hits the spot, 12 full ounces, that's a lot. Twice as much for a nickel too. Pepsi-Cola is the drink for you.
I'm so glad you guys are listening to this now. It's not just me.
Wait a minute, 1947, okay? I was 4 years old. At 4 years old, and this thing is in my brain. My brain is so full of songs, it needs defragmentation very, very badly. I'm still trying to figure out how to do that.
And this is the man who has to now write little notes to himself and put it in his pocket to remember things.
How did you all put all these notes together in the book? I mean, where did you pull out all this information? There are photos, there are stories. You wrote letters to zoos, to conservatories, to snake venom centers across the world, and you still remember the names of the people you wrote these letters to? How?
Well, to remember those guys, I mean, they're my heroes, so of course I remember them. But it's quite amazing. My mother, in so many ways, was such an amazing lady, and she saved so much of the stuff letters that I got from various people, letters that I sent to her from the school, some of my old school assignments and stuff like that, talking about snakes, of course, what else? And she just saved all this and gave it to us, and we still have it.
How lucky. You, of course, had to sift through, I'm assuming, trunks full of papers and find what was relevant. Fun?
Yeah, it was actually quite interesting to see what he said. Like, you only imagine, if you don't have these records, you only have your imagination, and you try to put yourself in a kid's shoes, and you try to figure out what it must have been like. But here you get to see him. He's talking about seeing banana trees for the first time, how the flowers grow upside down. It would never occur to you that's what a kid who comes from the States to India for the first time will see and latch onto. So in that sense, it was really, really remarkable to see these little time capsules of impressions, experiences, anecdotes. So it was really fun.
I have to confess that I've interacted with Ron briefly over the years, and recently more so. So my image of Rom is this, right? I mean, you say Romulus Whitaker, and you think of him catching the king cobra. He's already got this shock of white hair, and he's already got this whole hippie look. And then you read the book, and you have to imagine Rom on a Lambretta, 15 years old, cruising down MG Road without a license, with a backpack on that has a pet python in it. And I mean, like, it is such crazy stories.
And there was no traffic on MG Road. Can you imagine? It was bloody amazing. It was fantastic.
Is this the same pet python that you had to hide under the bed and feed secretly?
Same python, yeah.
How did you feed the python?
Oh, catching rats. I was an expert rat trapper. So, and we had a garbage pit behind the school, behind the science building, actually, the one that got scarred by the Molotov cocktails. And I would set my rat traps there, and the python was very well fed. Yeah.
You know, we're talking about nostalgia, which is a tremendous theme that holds the book together, because you're talking about nostalgia in India and then nostalgia again when you go back to the States, and we'll come back and talking about that transition. But for me, the most captivating part of the book was the visceral, brutal honesty with which you said everything about your own life. And I'm quoting from the book. My early love for destruction. My hands might be shaking, but my hands are bloody. I have youth and I have bad behavior. You talk of love and struggles in your youth. And how difficult is it for you to, from this vantage point of 70 years, to look back on that youth and be able to see it dispassionately with the honesty that you're looking at it, with seeing it for the good and bad that it is? Is that difficult?
What a question. What am I supposed to say, please?
All right, is it difficult for you to see him through that lens then?
No, I think when we started writing the book, we were very clear this wasn't going to be, a self-glorification exercise. It's so easy to fall into that trap. And that the whole purpose of this book was to chronicle the mistakes, to write about the lessons learned, and that, like one of the instances, like everyone, the first question they ask Rom is, how many times have you been bitten? It's not a badge of honor or courage to be bitten by a snake. And so we had to, if you ask do you ask an electrician, how many times have you been electrocuted? You don't, right?
Good one.
It's like it shows that the person is inept, he's not being careful, he's not, he doesn't know his job well. Like you wouldn't call an electrician who's shocked himself so many times to come and repair something in your house. So the same applies to a snake catcher. If he doesn't know what he's doing, he gets bitten. So it's not the question to ask unless you want to shame that person, which is a very good thing to do. It probably keeps them alive. So I think that's one, just to give an example of why, or what we did with the book, is to chronicle Rom's various stupid encounters and show what he learned from them. And there's not going to be another snake bite in the next following volumes. All the snake bites cases are here.
Already here? Yeah, which is great, because I want to talk to you about the snake bite. Thank you for warning me not to ask him how many snake bites he's been through. But the first snake bite you witnessed, right, was that when you were in school in Kodi with your classmate who got bitten? Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because this must be now in the 60s, maybe, end 50s?
It was 58.
58?
Yeah.
And so a friend of yours in boarding school, a boarding mate of yours, you'll go out into the forest, he's seen you mess around with the snakes, he thinks he's got it as well, and he grabs it at the wrong end, and it bites his finger. Can you tell us what happens after that? Because I have a follow-up question to that.
Yeah, he grabbed it at the sharp end. And it was a pit viper, a green, large-scale green pit viper, not a deadly snake in the sense that it couldn't kill you, but it can cause a lot of pain and swelling. And it bit him on the tip of his finger. And the unfortunate thing was that we were with a gang of kids, and one of the adults who was a chaperone had been a Boy Scout headmaster or something back in America, and he read the Boy Scouts handbook. The first thing you do is take your hunting knife out of its sheath and slice where the bite happened, and then suck like mad to get all the venom out. Please, this is not what you're supposed to do, really. But in those days, that's what people did. And so they did. And as a result, of course, he's got a much shorter finger than he should. but luckily, he survived it. Didn't get blood poisoning from the knife, from the hunting knife, which he'd probably done all sorts of other things with. But yeah, that was my first experience with someone who had really gotten bitten by a venomous snake.
And
good lesson.
A good lesson, like a lesson to learn. But things change, right? I mean, the protocol for what happens if you get bitten by a snake, not if you bite a snake, that would be weird, but if a snake bites you, the protocol has changed, and you've had multiple changing experiences with this, from freezing your hand to try and break down, right? I mean, that was a horrible experience as well. So how have the protocols changed? And I mean, half these protocols in India are written by you, so you have to tell us.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays we always say, look, if you get bitten by a snake, get to a hospital and get antivenom. This is the prime one thing that you have to do. All the rest of it is absolute rubbish, and very dangerous rubbish indeed. So get to the hospital as fast as you can. Don't get bitten in the first place. Now, this is really the best advice of all. I mean,
don't get bitten.
Yeah, don't get bit.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important for us to talk about this. You mentioned something, Janaki. You said it just shows that you're clumsy or stupid. And you remember in the beginning, I spoke about how brutally honest the book is. And Rom is so brutally honest about his own experiences. I think at multiple times in the book, you keep thanking the god of stupidity. No.
God of idiots.
The god of idiots. So he says that the god of idiots has blessed him and has saved him from. So I think the closest you've been to a near-death experience in this book was not with a snake, but out with friends who were drinking, and someone shot a gun over your head to try and kill a rabbit.
Yes, a jackrabbit. Yeah.
So what are the protocols for firing a gun?
Don't drink and shoot.
Never go with a gang of guys sitting in the back seat with a case of beer. I mean, I was absolutely straight. I was not drinking. And this guy shoots from over the car just after I get out of the front of the car. And man, have you ever heard, I mean, of course you haven't heard, but the idea of these bullets whistling over your head, like that, it was like inches away from the top of my head. I'm so lucky to be here.
Would we like to hear Rom read out something from the book? Yes. Yeah, I think that would be great. I mean, since we're talking about this snake, do you want to?
Yeah, since it's about snake bite. Okay. One night, I drove out of El Paso, this is in Texas, with the radio blaring rock and roll, of course, from XERF AM in Del Rio, Texas. This is Wolfman Jack. He was called Wolfman. Announced the gravelly voice of the disc jockey who started his session with a howl. I'm here to keep you awake on the road with the latest and the greatest. The Coasters' Poison Ivy was playing when a prairie rattler slid off the tarmac and headed for a thick clump of thorny cholla cactus. I braked to a quick stop and ran to get it before it disappeared. In my hurry, I forgot to grab the snake hook. So I restrained it by the tail and tried pinning its head with my flashlight. With the car's headlights in my eyes, for a moment I couldn't see what I was doing, and the snake nailed my right forefinger. A deep burning pain shot through my hand, but I bagged it and got behind the wheel. I drove the 32 kilometers back to the city with a pounding pain and my brain repeating, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. I cursed myself for my ineptitude. By the time I reached the Beaumont Hospital gate, my arm was swelling and my nose was clogged. If it didn't worsen, I could manage without medical help. I went into the coffee shop outside the entrance to wait to see before deciding what to do. Boy, are you crazy? Exclaimed the waitress on noticing my swollen arm. Get yourself into the hospital right now. Here? Let me finish my coffee, will you? I sheepishly replied. Crazy effing GI, she muttered. She knew I was a GI because of my short haircut. 10 minutes later, the swelling reached my armpit. No point putting it off anymore, and I walked into the emergency room. A nurse helped me climb up on a bed and the doctor instructed her to start an IV and infuse 5 vials of antivenom, which made me think I was in expert hands. Within minutes, I was overcome by intense itching and non-stop sneezing. What's happening to me? The nurse ran out to summon the doctor. He's reacting to the antivenom. Give him 0.5 ml of epinephrine, and let's start him on hydrocortisone. Are you choking? He asked me. I shook my head between sneezes. The adrenaline and antihistamine calmed the intensity of the allergic reaction, but hives had broken out on my face and chest. I dozed, but woke up when 2 nurses put my arm in a basin of ice. I was perplexed. Doctor's orders are to freeze your hand, one replied. He's trying a new snakebite treatment protocol. Later, I discovered the experimental and unproven theory was advocated by toxinologist Dr. Herbert Stanke, who suggested cryotherapy could retard the spread of venom. I protested being treated like a guinea pig, but I was a GI, I was a soldier, which amounted to the same thing. My arm became numb and stiff as frozen steak. 61 hours later, they removed the ice. I'd always prided myself on my high pain threshold, but the agony was excruciating as my arm thawed. I clenched my teeth to keep from screaming. They gave me Demerol, and I floated above the bed, aware of the agony, but totally unbothered by it. It felt like being on a permanent grass high. When I woke up in a drugged stupor, my sense of reality wobbled when a pretty nurse felt my pulse. Did I die? I asked her. Are you an angel?
I like the fact that he's been bitten by a snake, and anyone who's had any, it's unlikely that you felt the kind of pain of a venomous bite. And his hand has swollen up, he's driven 32 kilometers, had a coffee, gone into the hospital, and still has the gumption to flirt with the nurse, right? And I have to tell you that I've been bitten by a snake as well in Banarghat on my farm, and it also bit me on my finger, and I grabbed it, and in pain, I went running to my mom, who was at home, and told her I got bitten and then passed out. And it was a non-venomous grass snake, all right? So I can't even imagine being able to do what you did. But you're talking about these changing experiences that we've had, because the first bite was, in India, and the next one was in the US. Was that in the US? Yeah, it was in the US. But every change, and that's what's beautiful about the book, is that you are able to come back and circle back to characters you've met, to places you've been, and see it through different lenses of your own personal experiences. And you've had crazy experiences. Read the book. I'm going to go through a short laundry list of jobs you've done. All right? Mechanic helper, unsolicited road repair. You might wonder, what is unsolicited road repair, right? Tell us, Rom. Tell us how you made money as a child. Hooligan.
Well, when they lay pipes across a road, whoever's responsible for it, a pipe or a wire, they dig a ditch across the road, right? And do they fill it in? Not likely. So it becomes a very, very bad bump. Well, my friend and I figured out, this is how we're going to make some dough, okay? He had a little brother who had one of these little red wagons, and we'd fill up that wagon with sand, which was very easy to dig up, of course. This was out on Juhu Beach, by the way, so it was, a lot of sand. And we'd fill up these ditches, and then we'd go around from house to house and say to all the people living there, say, we've fixed the ditches, and the drivers and the guys who owned the cars and stuff, they were so happy about it, they'd give us 4 annas or 8 annas. The old currency.
Yeah.
And we make enough money for ice cream or Coke or whatever. And then, of course, the sand would wear out pretty fast, and we'd fill it up again, and then go around again for one more round. So this was entrepreneurship at age 9.
Yeah. You know, we're talking about changing experiences, and I love that you can relook at Lawrence School or Cody School or the teachers there, Mrs. Gibbs. There's this character, Mrs. Gibbs. You remember the beginning when I said, if you've watched Four Rooms or any Tarantino movie, right? The introduction of every character is this massive moment as you see this larger-than-life character who's going to now disrupt the entire storyline happen. And you have this in multiple places. I'm going to read to you my favorite character from your book, all right? I love this. We spent what was left of the night trying to sleep on a cement wall on the roadside next to the shop. The hard surface was uncomfortable and mosquitoes just wouldn't leave us alone. At dawn, I gave up on sleep and walked along the forest edge, watching the stirrings of bird and listening to the distant rumble of an elephant. Being next to the forest finally made me feel alive, energized, as pure air finally filled my lungs. Akhtar suggested we meet a European padre who lived on a farm a few hundred feet away. So after parking the bike at the gate, we walked in, hesitatingly called a hello, hello, and this deep, gruff voice asked, "Who's it?" A massive, bearded Franciscan brother in a brown cassock reclined in a cane chair on the porch, sipping from a cup. I introduced myself while shaking his hand, Romulus, but please call me Rom. He chuckled. What's so amusing about me, I thought. But then he introduced himself as Brother Romulus. And it was my turn to chuckle. Not too many people named Romulus in this village, he said. I told him to call me Breezy and gave him my share of the buck that we had just killed. Brother Romulus didn't have any priestly responsibilities. Instead, he taught villagers new farming techniques and distributed seed stock and fertilizer. He was this huge, beer-quaffing German with a great sense of humor, a huge bushy mustache, a full beard streaked from exhaling cigar smoke, and beadies. He also had an armory, comprising a double-barreled shotgun, a single-shot Winchester .22 rifle, and a monster of a .500 Nitro Express. Next time, you stay with me, because the elephants are coming for the ragi fields, and I need someone to stop them. And who doesn't want to read the next chapter of the two Romuluses together at night in the middle of a ragi field trying to stop elephants from entering, right? I mean, what a crazy life you've had. And then after all these experiences in India, from the middle of the forest to boarding schools to Bombay to Madras, back then Madras, of course, you now have the next culture shock of your life. As you go back to the US, technically your native place, technically where you're born, but it could not possibly have felt regular for you at that time.
No, not at all. I was Indian. I had, I've grown up here, and I had learned Hindi by that time. I had a smattering of Tamil. And I got to America, and there are all these white people. And it was kind of weird. I mean, where are the real people? And I didn't know how to do stuff. I mean, simple things like, you want a Coke? Yeah, there's one in the machine over there. Machine, Coke, machine. I thought you sort of give money to a guy and he, brings you the bottle and opens it. No, you got to put coins into this machine. But all I have is quarters. I don't have dimes. And well, the machine will give you change. The machine gives you change. I mean, all these things. This is just one little thing, but everything that I ran into was just, I don't know, it was brand new again. It was, I was very nervous.
And you had a crazy, crazy time there. I mean, you've got drafted, you go into service. In the service, you continue, working with wildlife and wrangling snakes and making a living out of that, meeting so many interesting people and invariably beautiful women. How much of the beautiful women's stories have been edited, Janaki? Because it really does seem that there's a lot of editing that's happened there.
Well, if I had left what Rom had written in the book, it would have been X-rated. So that,
Oh, those are the bits we want.
yes, you need a separate uncensored version. No, all the women are there. It's just Rom's descriptions have been a little bit,
Sensitized?
yeah.
Thank God for you. I love, we began this conversation by talking about you coming with this new stepfather into this new world with so many different experiences. And I can only imagine an 8-year-old child having to go through this with the family and the life change that's happening. But I love the fact that the last chapter of this book is called Homeward Bound. And that's when you're coming back from the US, back to India. Yeah. And I like the fact that, it's so descriptively written. And I'm so happy that you'll get to meet Rom and then read the book. Or if you've already read the book, read it again, imagining him, because I can see you running your finger along each line until you get to India and your eyes light up and you get that feeling like you're going home. So already India was home for you at that time.
Absolutely.
But it wasn't. I think when you first came, you were homesick for Husik.
Yeah, okay. When I first arrived in India, we lived in Juhu, which was fantastic. It was an empty Juhu, by the way, in those days. It was just a beautiful, empty beach. And the only people on it were fishermen and their kids. And those became my little buddies, And, but I did miss Husik, which if you get the book, you'll read about Husik, it was just such a magical place, northern New York State. My mother was a single mother, and she looked after I and my sister in this beautiful mansion that we lived in northern New York State. It was a house built in the 1800s with 22 rooms and big chimneys and fireplaces, and it belonged to my mother's eldest sister, who was a very successful commercial artist in New York City. So she was wealthy enough to have bought this fantastic house, which is a heritage house in America now, and 40 acres of land surrounding it with forests nearby. What a place for a kid. Yeah. I mean, it's just incredible. I could turn over rocks and find snakes. What more could you want?
Okay, I know that we need to save some time for Q&As, so we'll get to the question and answers in just a minute. I want to just touch upon two things, since we're talking about, well, not censorship or boulderization, but thank God you made it palatable for us. But there is an overarching theme of anti-establishment, right? I mean, you talk about your heroes like Brother Romulus, who was clearly, not your stereotypical, priest. But there's also Fidel Castro. Yeah, I mean, like you love Fidel Castro, Bertrand Russell. And throughout the book, you continuously intersect with religion, right? I mean, your friends were part of missionary groups, you've been, but at no point do you actually take on either of this. So my question is, loaded, did you actually write this stuff, and did someone, unnamed, edit it out before it came to the book?
Not really, but I just had this nagging feeling from the beginning that anyone who is latched onto a religion is just so selfish and so that my religion is the one. I couldn't believe that. I couldn't accept that. From the time I was like, I thought that was really not right. And that just stuck with me and still sticks with me.
And you have your own God.
Definitely, the God of idiots.
He's looked after you well.
He has. Thank the God.
All right. Shall we go into some question and answers? I'd like to remind everyone, we have very limited time, right? Because we've got to finish by 8:30. We have a book signing where you can buy the books. 8:30 for us, 8 for you. We have book signing outside, so there are books available, and you can get them autographed and meet Romulus in person. And if you're very nice, you might even take a selfie with you. So just to make sure that we're giving enough time for everyone or as many people to ask their questions, introduce yourself really short so we know who you are, and ask your question. Let's avoid recounting our own stories or comments, and let's save it for questions pertaining to Janaki, Romulus, or the book. All right? Any questions? You can just put your hand up. Someone will come to you with a mic.
Yeah, I'm Anand Kumar.
Yes.
I was just curious, you've spent so many, from your childhood, a love for snakes and a deep connection with snakes. What is your experience with reference to the vibrations or the psychic connect? Because there's a lot of, in many religions, in many states, we have temples dedicated to snakes. There is a strong connection between snakes and spirituality. What has been your experience in that context?
You'll have to tell me.
So there's a strong connection between snakes and spirituality in India. So
Yeah.
what's your take on it?
My take on it is on snakes and spirituality in India particularly, it's just wonderful because it's such a dichotomy, isn't it? Because we've got, I don't know if you knew this, but more than 50,000 men, women, and children are killed by snakes in India, by snakebite, every year. And yet we worship them. And you go to almost any temple anywhere in the country and you'll see snake stones, snake carvings, the traditions, the stories, the mythology. It's just full of it. So, it's just, in one sense it's wonderful, but in another sense it's totally bizarre. I mean, it's very difficult to explain how this could be.
Let me anchor this back into a tangible, real-world experience. Have you had any? I'm sorry. Yeah. Have you learned anything about humanity through snakes? Have snakes taught you anything about life in general? Like life lessons from a snake. I mean, they're your closest friends now.
Very true. Okay, the thing that I would tell everybody, and I keep telling everybody, that snakes are innocent, okay? They are deadly scared of the most dangerous animal in the world. Us. We are so dangerous. And they're way down there, and they're looking up at these giants, boom, tromping around, and ready to squash them or shoot them or whatever means we can to kill them. So they will defend themselves, of course, if they are stepped upon or otherwise injured or however. I think the restraint that snakes have is probably a good word to use because, I keep telling people that, okay, when you see an elephant, you don't go charging after it and sort of get angry at it and start, pretending you're going to beat it up. Well, it's the same with snakes. They see a huge human being, they're not going to come after you, for God's sakes. They know that they're faced with something dangerous, even if they don't have a big brain. It doesn't take much of a brain to realize that this tall, horrible-looking creature is very dangerous.
I love that snakes view human beings with more restraint than human beings view snakes. Yeah? That's lovely. Sorry, you had a question, ma'am.
My name is Radha, and I do know you. I wonder how Doris felt about snakes, your mom. How did she feel about the fact that you were playing with snakes?
Yeah, probably we've written about it, but in the book, I can basically date my love for snakes and my feeling about snakes and my defensiveness towards snakes from my mother, because I brought home a milk snake when I was about 4 years old. It's a harmless snake. Okay, let's give a little bit of history. We lived in Hoosick in northern New York State where there are no venomous snakes, and she knew this. Okay, so you can excuse her for being slightly crazy by saying when I brought the snake home, she said, "How beautiful." That, man, for a 4-year-old, the average mother who, and okay, let's even go further back in that. I was enamored by creepy crawlies of every description, even ants. I loved watching them. And kids love watching them. Most kids love creepy crawlies, okay? But most mothers don't like their kids to like creepy crawlies. In fact, get it out of here, you know. That would be the reaction. And I find this is just so sad. Okay, it is, you know, a creepy crawly could also be a scorpion, so so there are certain, lessons to be learned or to be taught to children. But if, as my mother was so, forthcoming about allowing me to mess around with snakes, this was a little bit more widely accepted, we'd have a far more sort of realistic look that children would have of creatures, and particularly snakes.
You want to mention that Violet also got snakes?
Yeah, her sister, there's a bit of history in the family. One of her sisters was also, would catch snakes when they were young, when they were teenagers. So she already had a bit of history there. So, but it was definitely my mother who got me started in this whole thing.
I like, in the book, there's a bit where Rom starts working in Mysore on the outskirts and talks about how many venomous snakes there are. And your mom says, there are so many venomous snakes, you need to be careful. And you're like, no, actually, what about the tigers and the leopards and the elephants and the bison? And he goes through a laundry list of things that are more dangerous than the snakes, right? I mean,
Yes, definitely. Just to make her feel good.
I think someone has the mic. We'll come to you, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Ishwar. I'm from Chennai, and I have the fondest memories of going to Crocodile Bank. So I wanted to ask you, what fascinated you more? Was it the snakes or the crocodiles that nobody ever talks about? And secondly, I'd like to hear a bit about your experience with the Irula tribe.
Oh, that's a really nice question. That's a really great question.
Yeah.
Your work with the Irulas. Just for context, Romulus Whitaker is the founder of the Madras Crocodile Bank Trust, which is pioneering in saving various kinds of crocodilians, now of course focusing on the gharial, correct?
Right, but you'll have to read the second volume for that. As far as the Irulas are concerned, man, these people are just magical. And I needed a peer group. Everyone needs a peer group of some kind. A gang of guys, girls, whatever it is, to do the same, or to be interested in the same things you are. Finding a peer group back in the 60s when I came back to India wasn't very easy. There weren't many people who were into snakes, but the Irulas were. The thing is, they were catching snakes for the snake skin industry, which wasn't exactly a very palatable thing for me. But the fact is that they knew all about snakes, and I learned so much from them. But again, I'm afraid I'm going to have to tell you that when volume 2 comes out, which we're working very hard on now, we're really trying to get it done, there'll be lots and lots of Irula stories.
Oh, I'm looking forward to those. In fact, the epilogue at the end of the book is really a cliffhanger. It really makes you want to wait for what's going to happen next. Sorry, ma'am.
Thank you. My name is Nivedita. I'd like to ask you, what would you tell, like say, a young person in today's world, so digital? How would you encourage them to connect with nature? What would you tell them?
That's a wonderful question. And all I can say is I would just encourage them all the way with whatever I could in terms of what they could read, the movies that they could see nowadays, the people that they could meet, the places, the wonderful places, the wild places that we have in India, and meeting weird people like me and other people who love creatures and can transmit the same kind of ideas to them. Yeah.
Also circling back, it's no badge of honor to be brave and to do something that's brave and stupid. All right? So, right? I mean, that is one of the overarching themes, is that I think there's a lot of youthful bravado that you kind of regret with the age of experience.
Oh, yeah.
So hold on to the excitement, but not the stupidity.
In other words, identify the snake before you pick it up.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, that's wonderful. Learn enough about.
Why should you pick it up? This is what Janaki keeps telling me. You snake guys, you see a snake, all you got to do is jump on it. Do you ever see the tiger guys jumping on tigers, for God's sake? I mean, come on, what's wrong with you crazy snake guys? And since, I mean, luckily we've had 30 years of browbeating and otherwise beating to... Wait a minute. So that I don't usually jump on the snake when I see it. I take a few minutes and watch it and, watch its behavior. And it's really much more interesting and much more fun. So I'm no longer a snake jumper.
Hi, I'm Saili. I have two questions. One is that I very recently started getting into snakes, so I'm like, there's things that I'm fascinated about, but I feel like there's so much that you know, and I wanted to know what continues to fascinate you about snakes. And the other is, I haven't read the book. From what I've heard through this conversation, I feel like when you came to Mumbai, like the world sounds like a giant playground. And like, while there was a lot of opportunity to do dumb shit, there was also a lot of opportunity to just engage with things that were exciting to you. And I feel like we now live in a world that is so controlled, and especially as a child, in terms of what you can touch, where you can go, what you are like exposed to, and like your 2 cents on that. Yeah.
Can you...
let me just put that question again. I'm not sure. What continues to fascinate you about snakes after so many years with snakes?
Okay.
So let's go with that.
Yeah. I have barely scratched the surface to understand and know about snakes. I mean, even though I've spent a lifetime looking at them, studying them, writing about them, making films about them, driving people crazy by telling them that they're actually wonderful animals, and yet I've still got so much to learn about them. We have just recently found out that there are several species of snakes which have very, very complex maternal behavior, looking after their young. We never thought this was possible. But, snakes are kind of like creatures from another planet. They don't hear, for one thing, and they use their tongue as the sensory organ of taste, feel, and smell. Almost everything that they do is related to what they find out with their tongue. How does that work? Well, they bring particles from the air or from the ground into their mouth, into something called the Jacobson's organ, which is hooked up to the brain, which tells them everything about what they've been, where they're going, where the prey item, and what was the prey item. I mean, they know there's so many things going on there, and we're just learning about them. So that's why it's still so fascinating.
Yeah. Sorry, you want me to repeat her second question? I'd like you to, because I wasn't...
No, she was saying when you were a kid, you had the opportunity to experience everything. You had the freedom to experience things that you wanted to, but now everything is so controlled. Kids are told what to do, what not to do, where to go, what to do.
Yeah, I'm afraid I can't solve that problem. But I don't know. India is just such a marvelous country for finding out. For finding out stuff that where else in the world could you find it out? I mean, so we're just lucky to be here.
But since you've asked about protocols and establishment, Janaki, you've also had a lot of work in this area, right? I mean, if I'm not mistaken, you drafted the management plan for non-human primates living with humans, action plan for mitigation of elephant-human conflict. You're the executive secretary of the Gharial Conservation Alliance and the crocodile specialist group and so much more. So I think it's an interesting question. How important are these stricter protocols for this?
Okay, so I didn't actually do the research and all that. I only facilitated the putting together of these documents. So I worked with scientists and researchers who know much more about it. It was actually a learning experience for me because I had by that time spent at least 10 years with Rom looking at reptiles, and I wanted to see what mammals did or to learn more about mammals, so I was escaping from Rom to go and work with people who knew much more about leopards and elephants and primates. So I don't know how that links back to her question. What my whole point of view was, how do we live with wildlife without us or animals paying the cost? How do we get along? So that was my primary interest. Like if bonnet macaques or rhesus macaques are entering houses, how do you solve that problem? Or if elephants are in ragi crops, it's not allowed anymore to go and shoot the animal dead like it used to be, because there is this whole conservation, there are wildlife laws that prevent you from doing that, and you do want to save species. But at the same time, how do you protect livelihoods? You want to allow people to save their crops so they can survive that year. And often people paying the price are people who don't have that many resources, not
agency.
like we do.
Yeah.
And if they lose the crop, that's the entire year's livelihood. So why should they be paying the price for us to feel better about what we are doing with wildlife? So I think that's where I was coming from.
Fair enough. It's a very large, I mean, like, we can't answer this question, it's far more complex. But I could tell you, ma'am, that if you read the book, there's a specific chapter in the book where Rom says something, and I've quoted it. I have to find the quote. This is the first time I realized that the system meant to protect the animals actually caused them more pain than they need. Right? So when you read the book, I think you'll get a slightly larger insight into where Rom stands in terms of the protocols to protect and how they translate into the real world. All right? Yes, sir. We have time for just 2 more questions, so ma'am, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, I'm Bhavna. I'm a writer. I just want to, first of all, I've been a snake jumper and I got bitten very foolishly. So I want to understand, as a layperson, can I volunteer at a Gumbe or any of the centers, but is it even worth it? Like, in terms of the fact that we don't want to add more to the, the landscape unnecessarily. So I want to understand the concept of volunteering in something like this, and can a layperson join, and does it even make sense to?
Yeah, I think I'm very proud to say that thanks to volunteerism, there are a bunch of people out there who are now recognized scientists, Indian wildlife scientists, who have, I use the word, graduated from the Agumbe Rainforest Research Station, or the Andaman and Nicobar's environmental team, or the Crocodile Bank. So there are really dozens of them out there, and it's a wonderful and continuing thing. So, yeah, have I answered your question?
Yes, we'll come to you, sir.
Dr. B.C. Rao, last time when you met with me, you were very busy with setting up the King Cobra Conservation Park at Agumbe. Are you still at it?
Oh, we're very much still at it. There's something called, well, I won't say it this way. The Forest Department has certain restrictions and regulations about permissions for doing research on wild animals, which is fantastic. It's fantastic, but it's very slow moving and it takes a long time. So we've just applied about a year ago to restart our King Cobra telemetry project. Radio telemetry is a fantastic device, and we're actually implanting small radios. It's a harmless thing for the King Cobra, but we get to follow them around and learn they can't do anything without, I mean, it's quite invasive actually. We watch them day after day for a year or 2 at a time. So we're learning so much about them. So we're just waiting for our permission to come through again.
The other incident, when I visited you at the crocodile conservation work you were doing, there were crocodiles all over the world crawling around there.
There was what?
And
Crocodiles all over the world.
that was, and I asked you how there are so many of them here. You said the minister in charge, Maneka Gandhi at that time, she was against exporting or sending these animals out. And you also told me that you're fed up eating crocodile meat. How is it now there, that project? Is it still going on? How
Yeah,
is it like?
the Croc Bank and the number.
He says, Maneka Gandhi, you said from Maneka Gandhi is refusing to let you export crocodiles.
Yeah.
Fed up of eating crocodiles.
Okay, well, again, we're going to have to look at the second or even third volume now for the answer. No, but wait a minute, I can quickly give you an answer to that. I've always been a a very strong proponent of what's called sustainable use of wildlife. We're not going to get into that huge debate because it is a very big debate and it really rubs a lot of people the wrong way. But I worked in a place called Papua New Guinea where the people have very little income. These are people, several million people live in very, very wild places. It's one of the wildest places left on this planet. And they have very little sustenance for making some sort of income. But they do have crocodiles in large numbers. So they are exploiting the crocodiles, collecting the eggs, rearing the babies, killing the crocodiles when they reach a harvestable size, exporting the skin, eating the meat, making actually millions of dollars, and basically supporting their entire lifestyle, and the forest remains intact, and it's just using a small proportion of the wild population. So it really works. In Louisiana, for example, instead of clearing all the swampland for making beef cattle for McDonald's hamburgers, the Louisiana people prefer to harvest alligators. So they have now over 1 million wild alligators in Louisiana, and it's again $1 million industry. This is called sustainable use. I'll stop there.
Yeah.
It goes on.
That's a whole different kind of crocodiles.
Yeah.
Go on, sir.
It's a bit of a strange question. Actually, to both of you. Your calling in life has been reptiles, snakes. Have you ever sat back and fascinated yourself about any other calling you might have had? And the same question to you, Janaki. You know Ram. So is there any calling that you have seen in him lurking inside?
To be a rock star.
I can understand, but would you back that up?
Yeah, for a short time a rock star, but yeah. What was that list of things that I have to do before I die?
I saw that on Instagram.
Okay.
Well, number 10 was reducing the belly width, which hasn't happened in 15 years.
So Rockstar, really?
Well, for a short time, yeah. But I also wanted to be the Raja of Great Nicobar Island. I mean, what a place! They're going to destroy it now very quickly, thanks to our developmental idiots. But, better not say too much about that. You never know who's listening. But
It's not a laughing matter because thoughts are always in our minds.
yeah. No,
A question at the back? Yes, ma'am?
Hi, my name is Minnie. The question I had is regarding the awareness videos that you had made called the Big Four. It's been taken off the internet and YouTube. Is there a reason for that, or is there an alternative video? I used to send it out to so many people.
That's a very good question. They were taken off because of some glitch, but they are back on.
Oh, is it? That's great.
Yeah.
Because it was in different languages also, so it was really helpful.
Could you write to
Yeah.
Snakebite
Okay.
at madrascrocodilebank.org
Okay.
and ask the same question because they'll give you the link to it.
Great. I will
And
do that.
what?
Just Google it and find it if it's on YouTube.
No, I think there's some difficulty with that, but I'm not sure.
Maybe
Anyway.
maybe the videos are closed for public search. So only if you have the link, it opens up. If you search, it doesn't. They have that option. So Snakebite at crocodilebank.org.
Yeah. And anything about snakebite, please write to, and
Okay, I will do that.
you'll get
Thank
a
you.
reply.
Hi, this is Ramya. I have a question for Janaki. So, when Rom came into your life, I think you had no choice but to embrace the snakes and the alligators and the crocodiles. What are your favorite wild creatures?
Oh, I don't know. I can't. I like them all. So, Rom's pickup line, I was going to say, well, I don't really know if that is. So we used to go on these nocturnal investigations in the early years. Basically,
That sounds horrible.
it sounds horrible. So,
Come with me.
So we would go out after dark, and he would take me to this enclosure where there were a lot of crocodiles, and if you shine the light, there are all these crocodile eyes that reflect back at you. They are like stars. You see nothing but stars. It's pitch black with stars. And I think that was just so magical to me. I mean, if you did that with deer also, you probably would have the same experience. But it was just so amazing. So I think, I don't know, I like snakes, I like crocodiles, I also like leopards and elephants, so it's hard to say. Sorry.
What isn't hard to say is that clearly Rom has some moves that he plays, all right? Because when you read the book, while he's stationed somewhere with a girl called Claire, Claire, right?
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah,
So
the same moves.
Yeah, so the first date he goes on, he invites her to go snake hunting with him, not to a restaurant or a...
I have to say that that's the only chapter where I think the hero's not Rom, but Claire, who drives up to pick him up in this bright red MG. Right? So the sports car comes and picks him up, and then they go out snake wrangling, and Claire sounds like almost as awesome as you, Janaki. Almost. Yes, question.
Very good evening. My name is Arvind. The short question is, ever been bitten by those creatures? And if yes, how was the experience?
Have you ever been bitten by those creatures, meaning snakes and crocodiles? Have you ever been bitten by snakes and crocodiles? I think you missed a bit. Yeah. I think have we covered this? I think, I'm so sorry. I think we've covered this quite clearly and want to focus on something different. We have time for like maybe one or two. You can just say your question from me, I'll repeat it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
My name is Adhiraj. Is it possible to develop a connection with a deadly snake from the wild? I mean, is there some sort of, can you tame it in some sense?
That's an interesting question, but it kind of leads me to think about some people who have taken that a few steps too far and said, this snake really knows me and really likes me, and then he gets nailed by it, and of course we haven't seen that guy anymore because he's dead and buried. But what was interesting is that when we were doing this telemetry with king cobras, we would tell the guys who were doing the study, who are doing the actual following of king cobras, stay a good distance away, don't let them see you, let's not interfere with their lives and change their behavior by our presence. That didn't work at all, because the damn king cobras would come and crawl almost in between your legs or over your feet. They just didn't care after a while. They saw this dumb human being standing there with this antenna going and listening to the snake going beep, 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 and watching them and freezing and the snake would come right next to them. So they just get so used to you. I was in West Bengal not too long ago, in villages in Bardhaman district, and the people there are just so cool with monocellular cobras. The cobras don't even spread their hoods when someone comes by. So the people and the snakes got along beautifully. And it's just a lesson to us. We could change the world if we could spread this and make it happen elsewhere. Good question. Just be a little careful.
I love this radio telemetry where you can use it to follow the creature's behavior, predict the behavior, and watch it and know about it without interfering.
Exactly.
I hope everyone has Aadhaar. Can we take a question at the back?
Hi, my name is Anirudh Neelakantan. So my question is about crocodiles. So the question is, why did you give the name Jaws 3 to the largest crocodile in Madras Crocodile Bank?
Why did we?
Lovely question. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, long ago I saw this film called Jaws. And it just had so much teeth in the film, you know, that Spielberg film about the giant white shark. And it was a very scary movie. And actually, we probably shouldn't have called Jaws Jaws, because he was actually not a very scary croc. He was a very friendly guy. And he was our, well, oh, okay. No, he was pretty friendly, okay, not very friendly. But that's why we called him Jaws. Jaws 3, we called him.
Sorry, just hold. Someone has the mic. We'll come to you, sir.
Hello, this is Shivaya. So in the rural India, mostly still people believe that tantrics and things, what they go through, they really recover when the snake bites. And how, is there any portion of truth to it? And they really follow a strict diet for a month or month and a half, and they recover. So I just wanted to check on that.
Sorry?
People go to tantrics after a snake bite and then they seem to be okay. Is there any truth to it?
Oh, yeah. Well, the unfortunate thing is that, the fortunate thing is that most snake bites are not fatal. Probably 90%. And whoever you go to, whether it's the Coca-Cola dealer or the mantrakaran or whoever, the herbal guy, the homeopathic, the Ayurvedic, I mean, you know, they all have their own good sort of treatments for certain things, but not for snake bite. If you're bitten by a snake, you have to get antivenom. It has to be, the snake has injected venom into your system, and it has to be counteracted by something else which is injected into your system. There's no other way.
In fact, just before we came in here, Rom was chatting with all of us about how to get this exact same message out to everyone, which is first step protocols in case of a snake bite and how important it is to get to a hospital for antivenom and not try other things, because the longer you wait for the antivenom, the more dangerous it is.
Yeah, the fact is a snake bite is a medical emergency. It's the same as a heart attack or an car accident victim. You've got to get instant treatment, even though it doesn't seem that way. Because at the beginning of a snake bite, it may not be very painful, but the venom is in you, and you've got to get it neutralized. You've got to get it counteracted with antivenom as fast as possible.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. As you must be aware, in the book of Genesis, the devil or Satan is represented as a snake.
Yeah.
And the snake is, considered to be responsible for the fall of Adam. So how do you reflect on that?
Yeah, it's so unfortunate, you know. I mean, that goes back to my religious stuff, but I better be very careful about that. I mean, I've got so many wonderful friends who are in this, doing religion, even from my old school days and so on. So I'm very careful about what I say. Mythology is mythology, and I think people should not take it too seriously. They should, too literally, yes, that's the right word. Because it has a place, and mythology is a wonderful thing, and it has a place, but not when it interferes with wonderful creatures like snakes.
Yes, we have a lovely question from up front.
Hi, I'm Philip. So there's this concept like snake charming. I've just always wanted to know how they and where they bring these snakes up from, where they get these. Are they like housed from the wild? How they manage to manipulate them and make them perform in front of probably a decent sized crowd? How would they manage to do this?
That's such a cool question, because when I was a kid growing up at Juhu, the first people I met who knew anything about snakes were snake charmers. And they didn't know much about snakes. They just told me all sorts of lies. They say, ye domu wala, is taraf che maina or us taraf che maina. They would say, because it's got a blunt tail, they would say that's, the sand boa goes 6 months this way and 6 months that way. Okay. and this one, the cobra, they actually poked some whiskers into one of the cobras. This is a very old cobra. You see, it's got a mooch. So anyway, I learned something from them, not anything really good. These guys usually don't catch the snakes themselves. They usually buy snakes from tribal people who are professional snake catchers and then keep them in a basket. And I say, what do you feed them? Oh, we give them milk. Okay, milk doesn't quite work to wild snakes, or to any snakes. It's not a natural thing to find in the wilds. So the snakes usually don't last very long. And of course, the dancing is all to do with the movement of the bean. And the snake, of course, can't hear a thing. The music is to charm the audience, not the snake. But when I first saw it, I thought, wow, the snake is actually dancing, And then I got clued in, and I knew the real story.
Yes?
I'm Dhanashekaran, and I'm from Chennai. And the question I have is, we have a farm, and my mother has been bitten by a snake. But she got antivenom after a while from the nearby hospital. But what I want to ask is, still sometimes she will get some itchy feelings during full moon day and a new moon day. Is it really true, or she used to tell that, or does the moon cycle involves in whatever we feel in our body, especially the snake bite that she has got?
His mother got bitten, she got treated with antivenom, but she gets some itchiness during full moon and new moon. So is there anything
you would have got knowledge about that? It's more like
it sounds like a bit of mythology, which has gotten, became reality, But I doubt there's any connection there. I seriously doubt that.
All right, let's take 2 more questions and then let's close this.
Probably a little different question for both of you. What are some of the challenges you face when you go about conservation of any animal in general? And probably you mentioned already in the talk, like the process, the government process is too slow. That's one of them. But in general, what are the challenges in conservation?
What are the challenges of conservation besides slow-moving permission process?
We've gone through a transition here in India, which is unbelievable. From the time when I first started working on, creating the Madras Snake Park, 1969, way back then, people were just becoming aware and awake to conservation in India. And it's grown by leaps and bounds. It's just fascinating and fabulous that so many people are so interested. There's some wrong things being done, yes, true. But I think, by and large, we're in a much better shape than we were way back then. And particularly because there are so many protected areas. I would love to see more protected areas, of course, but yeah.
Yeah, but we don't have as much forest cover.
Yeah, that's true too. So it's habitat that we've lost. But I know the awareness anyway is much, much better than it was.
All right, last question, ma'am. So there's a lot of pressure on you. This is going to be the question that closes our session, so it's got to be an amazing question.
Come on, Shanti.
Hi, Rob. This is Shanti. I just wanted to ask about snake bite. I mean, we say, okay, you have to get to a hospital fast to get antivenom. But is this true who makes the decision about, if you don't know what snake has bitten you, it could be mildly venomous. So who takes the decision then?
That's a very good point. The thing is, and like I said, since a big percentage of snake bites are not even, the snake doesn't even inject venom because we call those dry bites. So what's the point of going to the hospital? But I think the key thing is to remember that we have to treat it as a medical emergency. And even though it seems like a big hassle to get someone to the hospital, particularly if you're in village India in a remote place, it might be a tremendous hassle getting them to a hospital. It's worth it. It's very definitely worth it.
Usually people these days have cell phones, and they often show the picture of the snake that's bitten them. And if you're bitten by one of the big four, you have the antivenom covers them all. So you don't actually have to know whether it's a crate or a Russell's viper that's bitten you. It just covers that bite. Yeah.
But we don't want to end on a question about snake bite. So we're going to squeeze in one last question, ma'am. It better not be about snake bite.
Thank you so much. So some of us really want to volunteer on field. And you have taught some of my friends how to handle snakes about 10, 15 years ago in person. So can you please tell us if some of us want to volunteer on field, how do we go about this? Because I personally want to learn how to get friendlier with snakes and kind of overcome that fear. Mm-hmm. So, and get to know them more intimately. So what do you suggest?
I'm just going to butt in. Rom doesn't train anybody in handling snakes. He's never taught me how to handle a snake. If he trains me and I go get bitten, I can sue him, right? So it's a legal issue. And also, why would you want to catch snakes?
Not catch snakes, but more of, I think there is a way to kind of handle them.
But
and
why?
Then let them go into the... It's something that I watched on Nat Geo. It's something that I watched on Discovery.
I'm sure there are situations where you need to know how to handle a snake if you want to be a snake rescuer, or if you...
Use a broom. Really, I'm serious.
Like Madras Crocodile Bank, do they have volunteers where they teach, or even to take the census to count their population?
Well, I think talking about volunteering in this space is a lovely way to end the session. So what's your advice to someone who wants to volunteer their time?
I mean, getting in touch with the Madras Crocodile Bank is a good idea. Jerry Martin, Liana Trust, outside of Mysore, both the Croc Bank and Jerry's gang do have courses now and then, which they advertise for particularly for snake rescuers, to do things the right way. And you can be at any level of a snake rescuer you want. Just the idea of being able to be comfortable by holding a snake and then releasing it or something, or actually getting into the nitty-gritty of going to somebody's house and going through, tearing up their kitchen to get a cobra who's stuck in the back. So it depends on what level you're looking at. But there are opportunities like that, yeah, definitely.
All right, that's a lovely place. And I love the fact that we have two opposing views. Well, not fully opposing, but clearly Janaki is like, you don't need to touch them, you don't need to handle them, you get out of the way. And Rom is telling you that in case you really do want to pursue studying it at a scientific, ethical level, there is Liana Trust, which is run by Jerry Martin outside Mysore, and of course the Crocodile Bank. And I think you can get in touch with them and they would be able to directly tell you when the next volunteer session is. Thank you all for your time and your questions. It's been...
Thanks very much.
I hope you all have enjoyed it as much as I have. We're going to give Rom a 5-minute break, and then he will be available for you outside in case you want to buy his book or get it autographed with him outside. I highly recommend the book. It's beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Janaki, and thank you so much, Rom.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.